tell us why you kept homeschooling.
Jan got afraid and said, "Listen, I don't know that I'm enough for my children. I think we should put them back in school." And I called the timeout. I said, "Jan, hold on, wait. If you died today, I would quit my medical practice and I would take a weekend or a night job at the hospital so that during the week I would homeschool these children. If that's how much I am bought into this at this point." So I just sealed the escape hatch. I just said, we're in this thing because this is working great for our children.
Welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Before we get started, would you take a minute to subscribe to the podcast? It helps you stay connected with each new episode. And if this conversation encourages you, would you share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review? That really helps more families discover the show. I am so happy to have my dear friend on the podcast today. Roger Smith is a medical doctor from Gilbert, Louisiana, where he practices pediatrics and internal medicine. He'll tell you himself, sometimes your job defines you, but his most important titles are husband, dad, papa doc, teacher, and friend. He and his wife, Jan, homeschooled all 4 of their children through high school, and together they have spent many years speaking at conferences on marriage, parenting, and family relationships. Roger is the author of Parenting with Influence and the host of Parenting Matters Now, a podcast offering practical parenting wisdom a few minutes at a time. His mission is simple: to help family relationships be healthy, because that is making a difference. Please welcome Dr. Roger Smith. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being with me today on the podcast.
It's always fun to have conversations with Zan Tyler, the famous one.
Right. So Roger and his wife Jan are 2 of Joe and my best friends, and we started traveling together years ago, and we call it travel with a purpose. So we have been at many homeschooling events where we've either attended together or spoken together, and it's really just been so much fun. And every time we're together with y'all, our love and respect for you grows. So we really appreciate the way you have not only spoken into thousands of homeschooling moms and dads' lives, but into our lives as well.
Well, that goes both ways. We thoroughly enjoy our time with you and Joe, and you're welcome into our lives in almost every situation. There are some that we probably should not share, but nonetheless, the traveling together, it has been a delight, and it has really encouraged us as well.
So when I was talking to Joe about the podcast, he said, Zan, if you had a doctor like Roger, what kinds of questions would you have asked him? And I love that because, especially in today's world, I think it's really important for homeschooling moms to have and dads to have doctors that they trust, because we've got this whole narrative going on about we've really got to regulate homeschooling more to prevent child abuse. And none of us are for child abuse, especially homeschool moms and dads. But we've got this narrative that's been inserted in the equation now that we need regulations to prevent homeschooling, to prevent child abuse in a homeschooling situation. So it's becoming more and more important. Roger, you're an internist and you're a pediatrician. So do you deal with lots of moms and dads and family issues and child raising questions?
Well, I get much less child rearing types of questions in the office, and they're much more medical focused. And so, but we deal with all ages, as we say in the office, from the womb to the tomb. And so as in the family medicine type of practice, primary care, we really deal with, all common situations and some uncommon ones. And so we have conversations about, a vast array of things that are of concern to parents.
I remember one of my doctors in Philadelphia, our oldest had a terrible history of ear infections. And I could tell it was like the minute he started getting one, I could tell because his personality changed. So I made the mistake of always taking him to the doctor a day earlier, really, than I should have. And because sometimes it just didn't show up until a day later. I can remember taking him to my pediatrician in Philadelphia, and I said, I know he's got an ear infection. And he said, "Oh, Zan, he doesn't have an ear infection. He's just mean." And I said, Ty is very active, but that child is not mean unless he's got all this pain going on in him for this ear infection. So, so I had a couple of doctors that I had a bad experience with, but by and large, our pediatricians and family doctors have really been wonderful, and I really appreciate that.
The default position that you really want your doctor to have is that you want them to assume that you are right until proven otherwise. And sometimes we prove that the mother is not right, but you should start from the position that the mother knows what she's talking about. And so that's really one thing that I have taken as my position through the years, that even whenever it looks like the mother is wrong, I still say, this is what I think. Now you could be right, but here's what I see. And so there's always this time where, just like you would take them in before the symptoms or the signs, the physical evidence would show up. That happens sometimes. You go too early, so to speak. And so I've missed things because it has been early. And so you would really want someone who their inclination is to listen to you as the parent, and tend to believe that what you're saying is actually true.
I remember another situation we had with when one of our children was a newborn. She would just scream and scream at times, which was not her native personality. And so I took her into the doctor. It was a female doctor who said to me, "Oh, Zan, sometimes babies just cry." And I said, this is my fourth baby. I think I know that. And it turned out later that she had two hernias that were causing her a severe amount of pain. But we just voted with our feet and left the practice and left another doctor we loved in the practice, but I just couldn't run the risk of getting her, at 10 o'clock at night when we had an emergency. So I think parents have that choice, but it is so wonderful when you find a doctor like you, Roger, that you can trust and just have a conversation with. One of the things, well, let's talk about this for just a minute. We have a common friend, and I'm not going to use her name. And this happened about 10 years ago. And I think this situation is only going to get worse. And I'm going to read her testimony because I think it's pretty valuable. And I think parents need to be careful now, more careful when choosing pediatricians. If you have a pediatrician you love and trust, I just say, amen, stay there, thank the Lord. But I want to read you about our friend's experience. And I'm not going to paraphrase this because her own words are so powerful. So if y'all will just bear with me while I read. When my daughter was 6, it became clear that she had a physical condition requiring medical attention. I did what I believed any responsible parent should do. I scheduled an appointment with our pediatrician. After examining my daughter, the pediatrician told me that things did not look normal. He then said he needed to step into his office. I assumed he was looking up information or reviewing possible medical causes. While I waited for him to return to the exam room, I received a call on my cell phone from the local police department. I was shocked to learn that our doctor had filed a report for suspected abuse and that a Child Protective Services investigation into our family had been opened. I never saw our pediatrician again. He declined to speak with me, offer an explanation, or provide any medical insight into what led him to that conclusion. That same day, my daughter was was examined by a pediatrician designated by law enforcement who specialized in abuse cases. That doctor immediately determined that my doctor was not the victim of child abuse. In reality, she had a hormonally driven skin condition that was treatable with topical medication. It was a simple resolution to a simple medical problem, but little did I know that was only the beginning. Even though independent medical verification confirmed the suspected abuse report was a mistake, CPS refused to close the case without interviewing all of my children individually without a parent present and inspecting our home to determine whether it was a safe environment. The actual evidence did not stop the train. Even after the medical facts were clear, the investigation continued down the tracks as if nothing had changed. It took legal representation and the help of HSLDA to finally bring a halt to this and get our family off. What should have been a routine visit to the pediatrician and a quick stop at the pharmacy became an extremely stressful, drawn out investigation founded on nothing.
Yeah, that's a sad, and unfortunately, it may not be uncommon. Once the CPS gets their antennas focused on a family, it's assumed that the family is guilty until proven otherwise, rather than innocent until proven otherwise.
That's right. And we're going to talk about that more in a little bit because that's such an important narrative that's happening in the homeschooling
Yeah.
community today
Mhm.
from outside forces, not, of course, from among us, but also the way that doctor handled it. You and I both know this mom. She's
Yeah.
articulate. She's a
Yeah.
caring mother. She
Yeah.
takes extremely good care of her children. And, it was like he was looking for something,
Right. And
you
some
know.
training programs do put a lot of emphasis on looking for, suspicious situations and reporting those immediately without even investigating or asking adequate questions yourself. And so I have seen other pediatricians in my area that have been hostile, openly hostile from almost the first words from the parents, and I find it quite unfortunate. We should be on the same team. Naturally, there are times when we discover things are of concern, but we should not start at that point. And if your medical provider is hostile, that's not a good situation because you need someone that will listen uh, to your entire story, your entire concerns, and do a thorough evaluation before they would involve lots of other people, law enforcement. And the law enforcement, I understand their position has to be if they're called onto a scene, they assume that they are called there for valid reasons, and they're going to assume something's wrong until proven otherwise. So it's a tricky situation for first reporters, or for I'm sorry, not for mandatory reporters like physicians, teachers, etc. They feel like they've got to report anything that looks odd to them, but there needs to be a mindset of care to the entire family, and that it involves a lot more listening.
That's right. And so, parents, if you have a doctor you love, thank her or him and
Yeah.
continue going. If you have anything that raises any doubts in your mind, it's fine to leave and find another doctor. So, tell us, Roger, you have a resource for finding a good doctor if you're looking for one.
Yeah, and it's a growing list. So a friend in Colorado has started the medical version of Angie's List. Angie's List is focused on finding resources for your home, a plumber, electrician, et cetera, et cetera. And she has Christy Faith's list, Christy dash Faith, and Christy is spelled with a Christy, Christy Faith. Uh, and it's called Christy Faith's List. I think it's Christy Faith's List. Maybe it's just Christy's List. But you could find it through christy-faith.com. And she has been accruing a list of medical providers, therapists, counselors, anybody that could service the family as it relates to both health and education. And so that could be a resource to see if there's someone in your area that's already on her list that they have vetted. They know they have testimony of great experiences, good communication pattern, a trust relationship between the provider and the family. And so that's one start. That's the one that I'm aware of. And naturally, the word of mouth marketing, that is what most of us rely on. We talk to someone that we know, that go, and okay, who do you see and how is your relationship with them? And so we have to use whatever resources we have available to find the kind of provider that will tend to your needs in the way that best fits your family.
Right. That's right. So, Roger, what are the reasons that you and Jan decided to homeschool?
Well, it started with our first meeting of a homeschool child. We met the children before we met the family. But the family moved to our church when I was in medical school, and Jan and I were teaching a Sunday school class for the fifth graders, and we had a party at our house one Saturday afternoon, and this family was coming. We knew they were coming, but they came by the house, dropped off the children at the party, and these kids came in un not knowing anyone else, not even knowing us, came to this party, and they just folded right in. We watched them, and we saw them engage with others, and we saw the brightness in their eyes, and we said, "What is up with these kids? They are not average. Something is different about them." And we later came to find out they were home educating. So that was our first experience. We said, whatever's going on with those kids, that's what we want for ours. So I always say the proof is in the pudding. We saw the pudding first before we saw the process. And so that was our first introduction. And so Jan instantly, my wife is an early adopter. So when she saw that, she said, that is what we're doing. We didn't even have children at that time. And so we kept learning more and more about it. And of course, that was in the days when homeschooling was unknown. We had never heard of it. And so every chance we would encounter someone that was home educating, we would learn about what they were doing, how they were doing. Uh, and then the other reason why we pursued home education is because if we had followed the school schedule, I would have never seen the children. And we were committed to me being involved in their life because I would be leaving for work before they got up in the morning. And oftentimes my days were long in the early practice, such that I would be arriving at or after their bedtime. And so essentially I would be uninvolved in their life. So we said, okay, just if for no other reason, the schedule alone, if we can adjust their schedule to meet my schedule, that was an compelling reason for us to pursue home education. And so we saw the character of the kids, we saw how it fit our schedule, and of course Jan hated school. And although she had degrees, she did great in school, she hated it. It was just painful for her. It didn't rub me so much as it did Jan, but she said, if there is another way, we are going after it. And so all those things came together, and we so we pursued it in the late 80s. It was 1988 is when we actually got
We
started.
got started. Joe always says if he could come back, if he believed in reincarnation and could come back as anything, it would be a homeschool boy because he hated school too. So most of the teachers did not appreciate his humor. Okay, so Roger, tell us why you kept homeschooling. I know you started for some reasons, why you kept homeschooling. One was just so you could see your kids. Any other reasons you want to share with us? And okay, let me put a second layer in here. Did being a physician influence your choice to homeschool at any level?
Wow. That's a new question to me. So I'll think about it as I'm answering the first part. the
Okay.
the first part was this: there was a time where Jan wanted to throw in the towel. And so the question about why did we continue really is wrapped up in this. Whenever we were coming into the junior high years, well, prior to that time, we always said, when people asked, how long are you going to do this crazy thing? How long are you going to do this? And we said, our pat answer was, as long as it works for them and as long as it works for us. And so we just took it 1 year at a time. And so, when the previous year had gone generally well, we were planning it to do it the next year. But whenever the kids were in the junior high years and getting ready to launch into more, I guess, academic subjects in the high school years, Jan got afraid and said, "Listen, I don't know that I'm enough for my children. I think that they need more than me, and that I think we should put them back in school." And I called the timeout. I said, "Jan, hold on, wait. Calm down here." Says, "Okay, let's look at our children and let's look at the other children that we know in the community." And I said, If if you put them side by side, who would you like better?" And she said, "Well, there's no doubt. Not that they're just mine. I like how the children are." And we talked about their character development and things that we saw in them. And I said, "So, okay, that answers the question. We're on the right path. When we compare where our children are to everyone else that we know, we go, we think we're on the right path. Why would we change it?" I said, "Listen, if you died today, I would quit my medical practice and I would take a weekend or a night job at the hospital somewhere where I could make up the income or enough income so that during the week I would homeschool these children. If you weren't here, I would do that." That's how much I am bought into this at this point. So there became a point where I just sealed the escape hatch. I just said, we're in this thing because this is working great for our children. And so it took us a few years to get to that point where we saw, okay, this is working and we're all in. And there's no turning back. And so now, did my medical practice, my medical knowledge or experience or training impact any of that? I don't know that it actually. I don't know that it actually made a huge difference. I
Probably
certainly,
gave you confidence. I mean,
yes,
you
it
you
gave me
might have been more
confidence.
confidence
I,
than
I,
the
will, I will say, in that regard, I understood a lot about child development because of my training. And I knew that children don't get from, 9 years old to 19 in one fell swoop. There are steps, and I could see that they were developing normally, and I wasn't afraid. It made me less afraid, probably.
yeah, yes, probably
And the
the
other
truth. Yeah.
thing is that because it was in the early days of home education, and we were the only family in our town that people knew that were homeschooling in the beginning. Well, I didn't get so much flack because I was the doctor in town,
You're right
you
in
know.
town. That's
And
right.
so I
Yeah.
probably I probably had Jan and I had less questions and confrontation about that. So in that regard, it probably was a benefit. Now I don't know that it would be necessary because there are tons of examples of people doing profoundly well. Yes, the in-laws always are concerned when it's something new in the family. Our family was concerned about it, and we have a we have a funny story about one of my brother-in-laws. Uh, well, I guess it's my own brother-in-law. um, 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 that we were at a family wedding and he was talking to someone else at the table, and they had never publicly said it to us to our face, but he said to this other person, he said, "Yeah, when Roger and Jan started this homeschooling thing, we all thought they were crazy. Yeah, we just thought it was the craziest thing we'd ever heard of, but in the end we think maybe they were the only ones that got it right." And Jan and I were sitting across the table going, I can't believe they just said that. And so, but we just plowed ahead.
Joe tells a story like that. He didn't tell me this, which was good until like maybe a couple of years ago. But as we homeschooled and then we kept homeschooling and kept homeschooling, one of the people, Joe's brother-in-law, was tasked in the family to come talk to him and say, okay, you've laid the foundation, you've given them the foundations of the faith. Now it's time to let them go to real school. And so I just found that out, just a few years ago. Joe was really smart. And, it's funny because I knew that story about you and Jan in middle school. When our boys were starting to get to middle school, Joe had been traveling. I'd been working in the legislature. We had lost a baby, had a baby. I was just tired. I was really tired. And I looked at Joe one night and I just said, this would be, Ty was getting ready to go into the 6th grade, I think. So this would really be a good time to put the boys in school. And Joe had been, he's a raving homeschool fanatic now, but he had been, let's take this 1 year at a time and see how long we go into this experiment. And so I was just expecting him to say, "Oh yeah, okay, well that's good because they're both athletes and this is a good time to put Ty in school." And he looked at me, he said, "I'm not putting my boys in middle school. You know what kids learn in middle school? Heck no." And so I was so shocked. And I thought, so, well, we're in this through the 8th grade at least. And then we got to high school. And I told Joe, I said, I really believe God is calling us to homeschool through the high school years. And Joe said, yeah, I figured that. And they were both, they were both very smart, but they also both athletes. And Joe said, he talks about this a lot, and I appreciate it so much in him about having to die to his dream of having these high school athletes that everybody watches once a week, whether it's football or basketball or baseball or soccer. So anyway, it's interesting the different parts of your journey you go through as you're homeschooling. And it's so good. Not everybody has this, but it's so good to have a supportive spouse so that when you hit those roadblocks, usually one of you is feeling strong when the other one is feeling like, okay, it's time to
Right,
quit.
right. And that's so helpful. And we really encourage husbands and wives to talk through all of these issues and to try to get on the same page. And yes, there's usually one primary educator in the family, and the other is more of the coach, encourager. But what we found, and I hope your listeners will hear this not in a sense that they make it law, but this is as our children aged, we found that they needed to hear more and more from me, and and my role became more and more important. And so, but in one realm, math and sciences was my life. That's where I live and work and think, and so as the math and sciences became more expansive, then it was more of a natural fit for me to be involved in those discussions, and the way that I would educate was a lot different than the way Jan would, and just like you and Joe, I know Joe's style, and it's relaxed, and I'm not quite as relaxed as Joe, but but nonetheless, we had different styles, and the children needed different things in the teacher-student relationship. And it was just a natural fit that, I was involved in more of the high school subject matter. And naturally it happened when I was available. And when was that? 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so, and of course, that's when teenagers are awake.
That's exactly right. Joe and I laugh about this all the time. During the teenage years, all of a sudden, the kids have all day long to talk to you and tell you everything they want to tell you. But when you crawl into bed about 11 o'clock, that's when everybody would come pile on the bed. And about 1 o'clock, Joe would roll over and look and say, is anybody in this family working besides me? You know? But those are sweet, sweet times, and it's worth losing a little bit of sleep over. I remember we used to call Joe the chiropractor in our house in charge of attitude adjustment.
Yeah, that's a great name. I have never heard that. So in all of our times together, I've never heard that he was a
I
chiropractor.
know. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, because sometimes we just needed our necks done. I mean, we just needed a big adjustment sometimes. And and I know y'all laughed a lot and enjoyed your children, and we laughed a lot mainly because of Joe and enjoyed our children. And I would say that's such an important part of homeschooling. There's so many things that can weigh you down and so many difficult days. But at the end of the day, I think we really need to let our children know how much we love them and that we enjoy being with them.
You made me think of a few different things, but we do think that laughter is the best medicine. You know, we talk about, I mean, that's the famous statement, but,
Yeah.
laughter does something health wise for us and our children. And, our mutual friend Todd Wilson talks about that he believes that parents should have not unconditional love for their children, but unconditional like. Says your children need to know that you like them. And how do people know that you like them is that you smile at them. You look into their eyes. So are we always just trying to push forward and trying to get more out of our kids? But the scripture says, and it's a passage that's often quoted with discipline. It says, "Those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines." And most people stop at that point. But the verse goes on and it says, "Just as a father does the son in whom he delights." And we need to be delighting in our children. And it's when what they feel our delight that they will respond to our discipline. And discipline is more than punishment. It is training and teaching and coaching and inspiring and all those things that would go into a well-disciplined team. A well-disciplined team didn't well punish, they are well trained, coached, practiced, inspired. They're taught how to think about whatever they're doing, as well as when they don't do it, then okay, they get a little adjustment.
That's
They
right.
had to see the power factor. So they need to know our delight, and laughter is part of that. So one of the things we did was occasionally we would have joke night, and every child, regardless of age, was responsible to come to the table with a joke. And sometimes it was the same joke that they had heard one of their older siblings say a
Right.
couple of times before. But it wasn't about, something new. It was about every child finding pleasure and us finding pleasure in the child's attempt to please us. And it just, so the delight is so important. Find
So
delight
now
in
would be a
your
good
child.
time to tell everybody about your book,
Okay.
Parenting with Influence. And
Yes.
for and you can, it's because you can get so much of Roger's wit and wisdom in that
Yeah.
book. If you can tell
Yeah.
them the name and where they can find it.
Okay. So the book is focused on parenting through the years, and the title is Parenting with Influence. And the subtitle is so important. Shifting your parenting style as you and your child grow. And so each stage as your child is growing, they need different things from you, and you respond to them in a different way. And so we take a child development approach in the book and explaining in each stage as they're growing what's going on with them and what do they need from us and how can we respond in a healthy, delightful way. In a way that really builds influence through the years, because we don't start out with influence. We build that because it's based on a relationship. And just like Zan, with your sons now that are in their 40s, uh, you have no control, but you have tremendous influence because you got that delightful relationship with them. And in the early years, we focus on control because that's what we have. We can force We can force our children to do things when they're small, and that's part of their training. So I'm not saying that that's bad. In the early years, that's what you have to work with. But we can't stay there. If we're trying to control a teenager, it is going to be a fight to the finish, and we see a lot of that. And so it is that we have some way through these years, and I talk about it in the book, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of belaboring it, but we do kind of shift, or we hand over control in a sense that we gain influence. And so the book's available through my website, rogersmithmd.com. You can find it also on Amazon. So if you buy it through my website, I'll sign it for you and ship it to you. So either way is fine. So we have another resource on my website. It's a conversation tool, and I know you talk a lot about conversation with the children and that how impactful that is. And it is a product we call Table Talk cards, and they're just open-ended questions that you can use them almost like playing a game at the dinner table. And so we use them with guests. We use them with the children. Now we use them with our in-laws that come.
Oh,
Our
that's great.
daughter-in-laws.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they love them.
That's great. Well, and I love what Jan says too about one of our goals is to set our children up for success. And I
Yeah.
think that will be all throughout the pages of your book. Jan is woven through every page of your book. And I know it was really a joint effort. So thank you so much for joining us today. You can find Roger at rogersmithmd.com. And you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. Thank you so much for joining us, and may God continue to bless you in your homeschooling journey. Until next time, bye.